Hey, welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Hey, I'm decked out in some of my pastel colors, getting ready for Easter next week. Palm Sundays this weekend. A lot going on in the church community and certainly in my own church community, but maybe yours as well. Some preparations going on and a lot of things thinking about where are we on some issues of religious liberty. Things have calmed down over the past couple of years, I would say, after COVID and some of those things that we'd probably rather forget. But it's hard not to, think about that for a minute. As a matter of fact, I was calling into, where was I calling in? To renew a prescription, I think. And the automated message I was getting was reminding me about, I don't know, some, recommendations about getting your second COVID shot. I'm like, what did I get pulled back into 2020? What did I miss here? Why am I hearing these reminders again? And it makes you think about, some of those things that we went through, right? I sat on my couch, watching, Easter, right, on TV, experiencing, my church services at my church through the television. And I'm not saying that, some people do that quite often, but it certainly was not what I typically do or what I would have chosen to do on such an important day. So nothing wrong with reflecting on that and, work that's going on in the legislature and other ways to make sure we never return back to those things. Speaking of the legislature, we've got a lot of things going on in the Capitol this week. I was at the Capitol earlier this week on some important issues, involved in some very important meetings. There's a lot of movement. The budget in the House is on the floor today. There are a lot of amendments that'll be discussed and voted on. That's a big part of the activity as far as approving the budget. Our members of our Texas Values team are on the ground there. As a matter of fact, I was sending some text messages to some members earlier, letting them know where we stand on particular budget amendment issues. The amendment part of the process can be a big part of it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But, last week, we had an absolutely extraordinary hearing on the Texas women's privacy issue. This is Senate Bill 240 in the House. It is House Bill 239. That's Valerie Swanson in the House, Mays Middleton in the Senate. And there's still a lot to talk about, and some of that really was touched on, or at least was in the category of some of these things this week because of some things that have been happening in women's sports, but also in Congress. I'm going to connect those dots in just a little bit. But we've got a great guest who was a part of that day last week, who's going to be our guest today on the Texas Values Report. Abraham George is the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. Being in a position of this nature is nothing new for him. He served in numerous leadership roles as the chairman of the Collin County Republican Party and also in leadership positions in Collin County Republican Party before serving as chair and then becoming of the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. And he was at the Capitol last week, as was Duranda Randall, the vice chair of the Texas GOP, as part of this hearing, and I'm sure, attending to some other matters as well. But a very important day at the Texas Capitol, and we're glad that you were a part of it, Chairman George. I know you've been on the show before, and we've talked about some of these things as it related to election results, but I think this is the first time that we get to go through a legislative session with you as chair. Welcome back to the Texas Values Report.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Well, and I'm thinking about the timing of that, right? So you got elected last year. When was this? I guess during the summer when the convention took place. So you're not even. I mean, you're not quite at a year. You had a presidential election under your belt, which was historic, right? You and I were there on the floor of the RNC in Milwaukee. And now you're going through the legislative process. And not that this is new, the legislative session, but as far as your role, and I mentioned that because when you showed up last week, and you've been there other times too, not just last week, when it gets a lot of attention, it's notable, people recognize it. But I also think it says something about how the part of your role in the Republican Party of Texas chairman is that leadership of knowing when you show up at the Capitol and you get involved in things, that's leading from the front, but that's also an indication, I think, of people going, okay, we realize that the Republican Party of Texas cares about these issues if members of their leadership are showing up at the Texas Capitol like you and Duranda did last week.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a major issue for Republican Party, for God, for a fairly long time. And you've been fighting this for a fairly long time as well. We shouldn't have to in Texas, but we do. But so it's not only a priority, but a grassroots care about it in such a way that it affects their daily life, their children's life, their grandchildren's life. So it's a major issue. So I'm glad I was there, but Brenda was there. So many SREC members were there. So
Yep.
the parties all on board with that specific bill. And thank you for leading the charge on this, for
Well,
sure.
no, we appreciate that, and we're really grateful to see some social media support, some graphics, some people from SREC that got involved as well on social media that couldn't make the trip. And, we had more people on our side. We're talking about Senate Bill 240 with Chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, Abraham George. And this is a bill by Senator Mays Middleton, and it's very clear that we're going to have a statewide law. We're going to have statewide standards so we don't have men in the women's restrooms, showers, and locker rooms. And it's not just bathrooms. I know this issue has some history related to that term, and the media likes to characterize it just in terms of that setting. But it goes way beyond that, right? We think about sports context when girls are in locker rooms. We think about swimming pools and this applies to government buildings. It's not applies to private businesses, even though I think there's a legitimate concern in those settings as well. But the bill itself is about government property, and that could include other things. You have a lot of cities that have swimming pools where you're going to have people that are going to undress. You have some cities that have fitness centers, right? They got places where you can work out and you got to change. In some of those other settings where women are going to expect, and they should, a certain amount of privacy. But those lines have been blurred by the left, by the Biden administration, even the Obama administration. We know years back there was lawsuits. There was the Attorney General getting involved in these issues in Fort Worth. I remember there was a city council ordinance up in Plano, in your area of the state, where this issue came up, where they tried to, they passed an ordinance that touched on some of these issues going in the opposite direction. And so now we've got, look, the hearing, I know you didn't get to stay for the whole thing, but tremendous athletes that were there, and also parents, young ladies. Chairman George, you might have seen this. We had a young lady who testified on this issue at 9 or 10 years old when she was at Dripping Springs back in 2017 when the legislature almost took care of this issue. Now she comes back as an intern, a former intern for us as a high school senior. This issue's been going on for a while, but what was notable, so many women that were there saying this is an important issue and we think it needs to get handled. I think the votes are there, but we just got to make sure this issue keeps moving so we don't run out of time.
I think it's the votes are there too. I think the legislators, especially our Republican colleagues out there, want to do the right thing. It's just a matter of getting that through the committee hearings and getting it on the floor, because that is part of the process, and a lot of time running out the clock is a strategy that unfortunately leadership uses to kind of please the Democrat side of the aisle. We can't have that. We cannot continue to have the same fight over and over again and still get at the end of the session and say, well, we did everything we could. That needs to change, especially on this very specific subject. One of the things that this bill covers also is abused women in shelters. Is another thing that this bill covers, and it's a really good bill that we can actually, every Texan can get behind, regardless of Republican or Democrat. It's a common sense bill, and I hope it actually passes the House. I mean, Senate has done their job, and it's going to be a great bill if it goes through. I know Governor Abbott's all on board with issues in this nature. He has been a champion for women's sports and women's rights. So this is going to be awesome if we can actually get it through the House and get it to his desk.
Well, when we were there that day for the hearing, Brooke Slusser, who is a collegiate female athlete from Denton, from the north part of Texas, she competed and was on the women's volleyball team at Alabama for a brief amount of time, then transferred to San Jose State University where she got significant playing time, was forced to have a male player on her women's team. Not only that, but she was in the same, it was an apartment, but really a setting for the athletes to share, and where she had to share an apartment with this guy, did not know that he was a male because he was engaged in doing things to disguise and cover up. his true nature and his body and his anatomy. And then she also was sharing a hotel room and a bathroom with this guy a couple of times, if not numerous times, on trips where they would go into competitions. She's now back in Denton. She's finishing up her studies remotely because of all the fallout of that situation. She's involved in a lawsuit that the Attorney General's office has sued the NCAA. She testified on this issue in court in Lubbock about 3 weeks ago. I was there for that court hearing. But to tell her story was extraordinary before the state legislature, the Senate committee chaired by Senator Brian Hughes, State Affairs, last week. And also, her parents were there. Her mother got to testify. Riley Gaines, we presented some testimony from her, and there were other athletes and women that have concerns about this issue. This is an issue that's come up at the Capitol. We've had men going into the women's bathrooms where you've had the preservation board at the Capitol, along with Representative Andy Hopper, who had a staff member who was startled by a female staff member who was startled by a man coming into the bathroom. I mean, and it was interesting because the other side, sometimes they tip their hand or they get a little too confident. A member of the LGBT community testified a week before that, there's been people, men in the women's bathrooms probably almost every day, and, somebody's almost run into them if you've ever been to the Capitol. You just didn't know it, right? And so they're, sort of unintentionally, I guess, making the case that, yeah, it's happening. If it's happening in our Capitol, it's happening in other parts of the state. But speaking of the House, Valerie Swanson's carrying the bill over in the House Bill 239. She says she's got, it's a matter of official record. There are 80 co-authors and supporters over there, which is more than you need to get the majority. One of those is a Democrat, Sergio Munoz. We saw this in the election results, Chairman George, that this was a huge issue in one way or another that was a part of the results of the elections that we saw in November. I would imagine you agree.
Oh, absolutely. So if you remember Ted Cruz's campaign, he had one major campaign funding that was separately for this very specific issue, because Colin Allred, when he was in the Congress, and he actually did support against this value. He supported that a man can go to women's bathroom, and then so. Well,
not only that, to have our taxpayer dollars, really subsidize some of those type of issues.
That is right. You're absolutely right, and so it is a major issue in Texas, and it's not a winning issue for the Democrats, and they know that. So I know Colin Allred is thinking about running again. So this is going to be awful for him again, because over and over now Democrats are coming over to the Republican side and saying, yeah, I don't want my daughter walking into a bathroom and seeing a dude standing there. That's just not fair. It's not what we want as parents. So they're going to have a hard time going against this bill. But I think we're going to probably see more Democrats who are not signed on to the bill itself supporting this bill, because they know this bill is going to pass if we actually bring it to the floor. And they don't want to be on the wrong side of this. So the values of Texas is just different because we're conservative by nature. I hope that Democrats finally understand this is not a fight they want to pick with Texas.
We're talking about Senate Bill 240. This is the Texas Women's Privacy Act. It protects the privacy and safety of women, showers, locker rooms, bathrooms. And you mentioned this, talking about women's shelters. What about prisons? It also applies in those settings as well. I mean, and it's strange to think about it. People don't realize this, but there have been cases after cases have come forward where men that are in prison are being asked to be transferred to women's prisons, right? And you can imagine the difficult circumstances that could create. We know, unfortunately, there are sexual attacks on prison inmates already in those settings. We don't need to create more temptation in those circumstances by having these men, who I imagine many of them would love to be in a prison where it's only women. And so we've got to those are things where we've seen these issues come up, as you mentioned as well, in domestic violence and abuse shelters, where women are already traumatized. They've already had a circumstance where a man has attacked them, and they're trying to find a safe place, get back on their feet, and really, allow themselves to heal from that. And now they're going to have a man, almost in some circumstances, laying next to them or in close proximity. These things have come up. There's been lawsuits about this because women have said, we're not, this isn't right. right? And so this is a way to handle these issues that really have popped up in so many different places that maybe we didn't see 8 years ago, or at least were not being reported. And so I think the case is even stronger. Lieutenant Governor Patrick made it clear when we met with him and the athlete Brooks Slusser, he's all in on this. The Senate's going to get it done. As you mentioned, Governor Abbott has been supportive. He's posted his support on social media, which is always helpful. And I got to say thank you to him when I saw him at the governor's mansion a couple of weeks ago. There's what, 7 or 8 legislative priorities. I want you to touch on a few of those. One, including the issue of Stop Sexualizing Kids. We know there was testimony about that at a congressional hearing with Chip Roy on Capitol Hill yesterday. But have any of the legislative priorities passed both chambers yet? I mean, where are we on some of those issues that I know are very important to grassroots Republican voters?
Unfortunately, Senate have passed most of the priorities. I would say almost all of the priorities. Some of them not in the liking of the party, but it's moving from the Senate. But the House haven't done any of that. So the first priority is the border security. A lot of that is taken care of by President Trump. Another priority is securing our elections, securing our grid, stop sexualizing our children, stopping taxpayer-funded lobbying, stopping China from buying land or any hostile nations from purchasing and keeping our land in Texas. So those are some of the priorities. And unfortunately, we haven't, I mean, some of them are moving through committees. Yeah. It hasn't gone through all of that. Committees haven't passed any of those bills out. So Texas House they do move slower by nature, but this year there's not a lot of sunlight left, so it's time to do
well,
it.
No, look,
get it done and move to the floor and pass those bills.
And the Republicans have a majority in the House, an overwhelming majority, right? I mean, in a lot of these issues, if not all of them, on the legislative priorities list for the Republican Party of Texas, are 80, 90% issues. I mean, they're really strong. And so you would think these bills wouldn't be that difficult. The House is voting on the budget and budget amendments today. Sometimes you will see amendments that take the nature of something you might see in legislation. So we'll see how that turns out. Our affiliated organization, Texas Values Action, has put out a scorecard and sort of a guide of some amendments we're watching, some good, some bad, and that we're going to be scoring on, but also trying to educate members and saying, hey, these are why these amendments are good or bad as a resource to them. And so we'll see how some of that plays out. But there's also this expectation, okay, once they get past the budget, maybe you're going to see things moving. I'm concerned there are some bills that are getting hearings that have no reason to be chewing up time. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. We've got some stuff on social media. People can see that. But you're right. We're almost to the second week of April. I mean, technically we are. Today's April 10th. And, you do start to run out of opportunities to have hearing in time. And then you run up against, an early May deadline of when bills can pass the House. You're looking at maybe 4 weeks left. You've got Easter coming up next week, and that shortens things a little bit too. And so, I think it's fair to start expressing some concern or wonder or saying, hey, we're going to start moving a little bit quicker over here, and hoping that the Democrats don't try to use, the school choice issue and some other big bills as bargaining chips and chewing up some time that leaves less time of these things to getting passed. But that's why it's important for people to get involved. I know a part of what the Republican Party Texas does through SREC and other grassroots mobilization is getting people to the Capitol. I know there's been a couple of times this session where y'all have already had some big groups there, and I've seen it. I've noticed it. I would imagine members have felt a little bit of that presence. I will just state it that way, but also in an encouraging way. When people show up at the Capitol that are backing up these members, it also will help them make the case, and I would imagine see what the priority is. Now, what has been your perspective on that when y'all have had some big groups there? What's the turnout been and the field been like in response by members?
I think it's been pretty positive. A lot of the members we held rallies both time when we were there as a group. A lot of legislators came out and spoke. We invited all of them. We said, hey, we're going to be there. If you want to show up, we'll give you a couple of minutes. Tell us your priorities, bills are. I mean, they probably filed a bill for Stop Sexualizing the Children. We want to know what that bill number is. We want to know if that bill is actually going to move. So it's been pretty positive. We haven't had any negatives from legislators who are, I would say, somewhat not on our side all the time. But they've been very open to have conversations when we go into their office and things like that. One thing, and Jonathan, you know this, you come to Capitol a lot. So one thing is they see lobbyists all the time in the Capitol halls. They walk in because they get paid to do that. They're showing up every day. They're asking them, how can I help you? What can I do for you? All of those things. And we rarely show up. I don't say rarely. We show up maybe twice or three times a week. The lobby groups are there all day, every day. And That changes a little bit. And the legislators need to see our grassroots members, activists who are conservative, who's fighting for things like stop sexualizing our children, our border security, our grid problems, all of those things. They need to be able to see that. The SREC members have been great at this session. They show up. I can walk into Capitol on any given day and see like 5 SREC members who are walking around and fighting for some of our priorities. So it's been good, but I do want to encourage all grassroots to show up as much as you can. I mean, I know Texas is a huge state. Some people have to drive 8 hours to get here. So I understand the logistics and the problems that comes with it. But at the same time, if you can make it, show up because it matters. It changes the narrative and the legislators' offices.
Yeah, no,
that's been great.
You're absolutely right. We're talking with Abraham Georgia. He is the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. And, we've got a great booklet, the Texas Legislative Guide. People come into town. Our office is right across the street from the Capitol. We can give you that guide for free. It's about an 80-page booklet, a lot of good information there, a map of the Capitol, the office numbers, their phone numbers, all that kind of stuff to help you navigate the process, but also get to the right place and know who have information to use to contact people. There's also a digital version of that. So if you want to just go to our website, you can flip through that digitally if you don't get a chance to get a hard copy of it, but we've got thousands of these booklets. They're free. We can pass that along to people. We've also got some great videos. Our Texas Legislative Advocacy 101 and 102, those are on YouTube. We're about to launch our Texas Values University online portal. These are all ways to get trained before you go to the Capitol to figure out, hey, how does all this work? Where do I need to be? But, I tell you what, April and the first week of May is when a lot of decisions are being made. So anytime people can come to the Capitol, it will have value in the next 4 to 5 weeks, and anything we can do, and I'm sure the Republican Party of Texas will be happy to help as well. But we're going to see what happens. It may be a long night for the House with the budget and the budget amendments. Typically, that's the case. I know you're going to be watching. We're going to be watching. We're going to be posting updates, and I hope we have some good votes on some key issues, some issues of life, some issues related to the way money is spent. The definition of male and female. Are we going to make sure that we sort of protect ourselves from these confusion and these issues, these universities and other state agencies that aren't quite getting the message? And as well as how the money's being spent, are we going to, be a little bit more reserved and responsible with it and make sure that the Democrats and liberals don't run away with some funding that go against our values? But listen, there's so many reasons to continue to stay engaged with our work. If you're a part of working with the Republican Party of Texas, they've got people at the local level that you can contact and be engaged in. And so I always get encouraged when I see you at the Capitol, and I imagine you have the same impact on other people, Chairman George, but I appreciate the time that you've invested in being active up there, recognizing the importance of your role and the party's role in the legislative process and, the relationships that y'all continue to develop and shore up with members for the legislature. And so thank you for all the hard work that you do, and thank you for being our guest today, Chairman George, on the Texas Values Report.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
Okay, I have about a minute and a half left. Look, there's a lot of activity at the state capitol. I mentioned, though, in D.C. yesterday that there was a congressional hearing in a subcommittee of the judiciary, and this featured Dr. Eitan Haim, who is a Texas surgeon who we've worked with. We helped him free himself from the Department of Justice that had an investigation and an indictment against him for 10 years for telling the truth. He was a whistleblower against Texas Children's Hospital when they were covering up that they were still involved in procedures and processes trying to help kids transition from male to female or vice versa, while telling the public that they weren't doing those things, right? And he was like, wait a minute, I see it happening. He came out and spoke the truth. Then the Biden administration's Department of Justice came after him, tried to put him in jail for 10 years. Trump got elected just in time to put new people in there, including Attorney General of the United States Pam Bondi. Those charges were dropped against Dr. Heim, but he testified about this, lawfare, if you will, and unjust type of things that were going on during the Biden administration. Vanessa Sivage, who was a former intern of Texas Values, now runs her own organization for protecting kids, was there testifying. She was a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital. She got fired for just wanting to be transferred to another division of Texas Children's Hospital because she didn't want to be in the middle of this stuff either, where they were trying to, transition kids and their sexes, and all that failed. And now she's got her own organization. So go on social media, check out some of that testimony and some clips and footage of that. It's still important. We don't want to repeat the past. We got to tell the story of why it happened and put a little spotlight and pressure on people because of those issues. By the way, we have an event in Fort Worth with Dr. Heim on May 10th. Tim O'Hare is the county chair and county judge for Tarrant County. He's going to be our MC. We've got Brooke Slusser, the female college athlete that testified last week. She's going to be a special guest and speak for a few minutes. So this is going to be a great event at the City Club in Fort Worth. So check that information out. Get your tickets soon. Listen, these are many reasons why you should consider supporting our work. We've got a $2 million budget. We're getting close to the end of our fiscal year, which is on June 30th, less than 3 months left. Please consider a tax-deductible donation right now at txvalues.org so we can protect faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.